got a pretty decent selection of horror movies this year, and it's time to go over my favorite. Welcome to Cinema, where we focus on a film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know in the comments below, what were your top 10 horror movies of 2024? We all have different opinions, trying to look at different movies in different ways, so make sure to like this video if you enjoy it, subscribe if you haven't already to join in the film culture community, where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. And coming in with some honorable mentions, we got Speak No Evil, Blink Twice, and Quiet Place Day 1. But coming in number 10, we have Longlegs, one that is so excellent for Nicolas Cage, pulling off this different sort of psychological horror movie sort of ambiance, and the way they take on this 70s sort of vibe, this old style sort of thing. The great cinematography, the directing by Osgood Perkins is just fantastic by the way they build up the horror, the suspense that really builds upon the story. There's some slow moments that really takes a minute to get going, understanding what the feel to it is, but upon rewatch, I feel like it'll be even much better. The psychological aspect will be much more horrifying, and that's where the key moments for this film is with Nicolas Cage, and the supporting roles are just as good for the way they build upon this detective mystery side, the build up to that, the questions that you have throughout, and the twists that unveiling themselves by the end. That's something that was really big, is the unraveling of this story, the questions that really take end to the matters that are met in a way that is unexpected, for the way and the nature of how this takes this older style feel and manages to craft its own unique style story that may carry on some familiar elements here and there, but it's all for the right reasons, that builds up on its own aspects and the ambience that creates a great horror vibe. And at number 9, we have Strange Darling, one that I just watched recently that really stuck with me just for the way they build upon this atmosphere that is very down to earth, because a dramatization of a real story about sexual predators, things that go about along the way. It can carry familiar beats, what they're doing with the story. It's obviously naturally done in a way that is familiar, but at the same time, they manage to tell the story in a different fashion, going about 6 different chapters that are put out of order, that hides the reveal of what all is going on by near the end. And so by that time, you're still invested within the story throughout, because you're still, even if it's stereotypically the same sort of story you expected it to be, it ends up being something kind of completely different in some general scheme. The acting is great, the way they build upon the circumstances, going close encountered with these characters, and building upon all these clues that mean something so much more based on the chapter that they're showing you, and then later on you see those pieces of evidence lay out, and then what it ultimately becomes by the end of the day is something that's so much more powerful of a story, outside of the realm of it being powerful for the basic standards of being something that, yes, it may be a dramatization, but the sexual predators type of area is something that's still important to highlight and unfortunate to be seen time and time again. But the way this movie managed to craft it in a unique way by doing the out of order sort of sequence makes it that much higher on the standard of being able to be just watchable for the standard and enjoyment, outside of being uncomfortable that these sort of circumstances take place. And at number 8, we have MaXXXine, the culmination and the third part of the trilogy to the X trilogy. So how that all pulls off and comes full circle by the end. Now there's some things that you're sort of over on the nose once it gets to its ending. What it's going about is wild, but at the same time, I do like a good amount of wild to my film. What we're getting out, obviously there's certain elements to the Christian father that isn't Christian to that standard, what you're following up with the reveal, other things that come about along the way, MaXXXine just trying to become an actor, how we're getting Kevin Bacon as a side actor that really pulls off this interesting character role that we haven't really seen too much before outside of some of his standard movies. But Mia Goth is just great for how she's performing, and Ty West's direction with this film, while it may not be the film that everyone expected it to be, it's still one that pops out to me. I find it even better than X for me personally, more watchable, at least at that standard, and taking it to the old Hollywood type of feel. It's something that pops up a lot more, becomes more eccentric by the nature of these predators that are all going on in Hollywood, and so how that all pops up along the way becomes compelling by the nature of this setting, how they pull off all the set designs, the natural flow of the story, that builds up to something that's a solid third act for the nature of what it's building up to. And at number 7 we have Lace. Now this was about one of my first movies that I managed to watch in 2024, and it still stands out as an independent film that's pretty much one set location the whole entire time, with only a few different cast members that take up the whole type of film, and it's well worth the time. It builds upon the eccentric energy, the ambiance to this horrific background, certain twists and turns that take along the way that builds upon the nature, and use its limited scale of being trapped in this one house to the nature of locking you in and trying to connect with all these characters in different ways, introducing new characters here and there coming into house, and that's what sets up different circumstances in other ways that you don't quite expect, that builds upon the elements to a great surprise for the build up, that the question of what the girl wants to do with her husband to begin with, and how that all unravels throughout the film by the end, goes about in a way that I did not expect, underappreciated and overlooked for the nature of what I've heard people talk about. This only went straight to VOD, so it's understandable, but at the same time, Lace is one that gets underlooked way of building upon its story, building upon its stakes, and becomes something that's still worthwhile and has interesting characters by the end of the day. And at number 6 we have Heretic, an A24 film that I expected much from, because we got Hugh Grant as the star role, and he is creepy as ever. For the nature, you're going about a cat and mouse sort of game. It's a religious thriller where these Mormon missionaries are sort of trying to go about, preach the message, and everything that's going about. They come unprepared. Obviously, they don't know how to answer questions, so there's a lot more that's questionable of, yes, people can come unprepared, but at the same time, there's a setup that these characters are not developed enough in their roles, what they should be doing, but at the same time, it still creates this great environment that's different in the nature that I wouldn't have expected. It takes some turns here and there, certain small twists that mean a lot more for the story later on, and the build-up of how things come about along the way creates this different sort of atmosphere that's disturbing, and yet at the same time, that's where Hugh Grant's role stars that much greater, the way it's pulled off and the build up to certain things. Yes, there's some weird moments, Hugh Grant doing a Jar Jar reference that must have been the writers doing a poke at him not being able to get a high-pitched voice. That's unfortunate for the case of certain elements here and there, but taking all that aside, it's a great piece of media that I really just highly enjoyed and am excited to get back into it once I can. But before we go into my top 5 horror movies of 2024, I'd love to see your picks for the top 10 horror movies that you just enjoyed, loved, and were able to watch. Maybe I missed a few, and I'd love to see your recommendations. But first, we got a few more honorable mentions, such as Terrifier 3, Smile 2, and Never Let Go. And at number 5, we have Alien Romulus, one I was not expecting to be nearly as good as it was. Basically, standing up to the original Alien, just in a certain sort of aspect that is unexpected, taking this prequel sort of route to Alien 2, managing to build out these compelling characters, take a little bit twists and turns here and there with the way they're setting up the robot, the way they're establishing the story as a whole, taking in this new ambience to the setting, building upon this sci-fi sort of feel that me personally, I love the genre for. And so the way they intermix that with the horror aspect, what we get going into the third act especially is weird and wacky, but the right kind of weird and wacky that I personally just really enjoyed out of it. It's something very out of left field, but it's something still that it's way up my alley to the general essence, still with the right build-up for the first and second act, the elements that make this intriguing for this lost in space sort of adventure, predictable to some general means, but at the same time creating all these different elements that builds upon the own stakes, creates these high stakes that really builds upon the characters, maybe some of the top performances, the top characters of the year, at least of this sort of genre. The way they establish roles, the way they take people out left and right, and even give a nod to the first Alien movie makes it something very interesting, very compelling by the way they set up all the environment, the CGI, the lighting effects, everything that floats about along the way gets you lost in the immersion for this film that just manages to really stand out among the rest. And at number 4, we have Abigail, a vampire flick that I was not expecting, and fortunately I did not get spoiled for any of the trailers that sort of spoiled the main twist that obviously was made to advertise what sort of film it was. But for those that didn't know it was a vampire film, the reveal of the girl, how that all flows about, most people were turned off and the main reveal was already gone for them. And for me personally, it was a huge thing. Locked in this house, going about the kidnapping of this one girl, and the ultimate reveal, the lead up with all these different people finding more about each other along the way when they're sort of meant to be secretive. They're special ops sort of force that are doing their job for this big cash and money. And so that flows about in an interesting and compelling way that I was not expecting for the nature of the flow of the story, the bouncing back and forth between character to setting, while also primarily taking place within this large house once they get grounded on to the environment that they're set into, protecting and kidnapping this girl for 24 hours, trying to get some ransom for this girl. So how that flows on about, and the mystery reveal that goes about and shows itself by the end of this other guy, the guy that's in charge of a whole operation, goes about some bloody kills, some bloodthirsty aspects of the film that has such great effects, terrifying moments that gets you close encountered, locked into the setting that these guys are just as well. And so that's one that, especially for me that didn't know what it was all basing it on of, it's something that really sold itself to me from the very get-go. And at number 3, we have I Saw the TV Glow, an A24 film that, again, it has all the right A24-isms that fits well for me. It's weird, it's wacky, all the colors, all the lighting, it spills out all these interesting story beats that's not for everyone especially, but what we get out of Justice Smith, other people, that the cast works effectively. There's some weird tropish sort of ideas that go about along the way. It's a different sort of flow, a unique feel, the coming of age sort of aspects that go about in a unique way, learning about this TV show based on these books, other things that creates this different sort of environment about running away, about doing all these sort of things. It doesn't necessarily have a clear-cut message of what it's trying to be. I don't really remember quite as much about what it's specifically all about, but that's still something that sticks with me and becomes effectively my type of film by the nature of how everything is built about, the way it's creative and colorful for the nature of what it all does with its directing, what it does with its cinematography, and the cast as well just performs so effectively for the nature of something that's unpredictable to the wildest extent, and maybe that's why it can turn people off so far, but it's at the same time something that works way more effectively for me because of the weird mannerisms, what it does with the cast, with the story, with the flow of the nature, that is not always the quickest pace, but it's something that really still livens up the environment, sucks you into the atmosphere, and builds you into the gluing your eyes to the screen. Just as I see the TV glow, the way they build about this environment sucks me into the immersion that this film ultimately could be asking for. And number 2, we have Nosferatu. Now this and my number 1 pick could go neck and neck with each other. Maybe upon the next rewatches, they'll be swapped, but at the same time, Nosferatu from director Robert Eggers is one I expected much of because of the director that's attached to it. I just enjoy all of his work, the way he pulls off this bleak, this noir sort of environment, and it's perfect in that tone because the nature of the original 1922 to 1979 that takes on that black and white sort of feel. And while this is in color, most of its colors are in black and white, gray, it's bleak, it has the right tone, it has the right atmosphere, the cinematography is stellar for the natural craft that Robert Eggers brings. What we get out of Nicholas Hoult, Lily Rose Depp, and Bill Skarsgård as Nosferatu, the vampire himself, just pulls off something that's remarkable for the fullest extent, how it builds upon the story. Certain things are not always the most clear-cut, not necessarily always something you can follow all the way through. It's a period piece that certainly has its own cultural moments that are outdated, but very fitting to the story that it's taken on. And that's what something, while it borrows some elements of Bram Stoker's Dracula, it's something that really sells itself to its fullest extent because the atmosphere, the most words that I can describe it for is haunting and immersive, and that's truly what it was, truly what it is. Having William Dafoe, especially as a side character, other side cast members are just fantastic. How they build upon the environment, and ultimately, while the first exposition can be a little bit slow, it still feels essential to the build-up, including the reveal of Dr. Orlok the vampire himself, the full look at him, the immersion, you can look into it, the blood effects, the cinematography, other things that come about along the way. The camera is used nicely by its movements, the look, the slight shifts to show reveals of other things, the environment and the set design of the whole town, the whole environment, the whole castle, everything that works together to the fullest extent is something that I was not, even though I expected much of it, expecting to get so much of it to be pulled off so effectively that by the end of the day, it's just something that easily went straight up on my list, even though we got it in the last month of 2024. And at number 1, we have The Substance. Like I said, neck and neck with Nosferatu, but this one was a little bit more unique, definitely with its style. It's a lot more weird for sure, and that's what makes it weird. It almost becomes a comedy to some standard by the end, just all the wacky moments that come about along the way, while also maintaining a story you can follow, taking the substance to become someone new. It's all about this one girl that is getting older. She's not getting to be the style and look that these contestants are trying to make her out to be for being a TV star. And so she takes this substance that makes her a younger girl, but there's consequences for holding on to that body for too long. And so they have to swap back and forth week after week, but that's not always the way they go about, as you may expect. But that's taking it into wackier moments, the way the body deformities take place, the way they build upon the characters, the way they establish all things. And we also get Dennis Quaid as a side character that stands out in his fullest extent. I love him as an actor, but he's been doing too many of the same roles recently. So this is what really
helps them to stand out. It's gross, it's grotesque with the way certain things are coming about, and the effects in this film, the practical, the VFX, everything's just fantastic to the fullest extent, and the cinematography stands out for the colors, the ambience of the nature of the film, the close-ups, the far scale that makes it immersive in one's retrospect, and just taking you into this weird environment all the way up to the end where you get this weird monster scene that you just have to see to believe. That even my theater became laughing within that sequence, to where, yes, this is almost so weird, it's a comedy to that retrospect. And so the way they build upon this environment, the way they take on Demi role more, and just having her get a great performance, other ones that stand out just as well, becomes something so incredible that makes it my #1 horror film of 2024. So that's just my favorite top 10 horror films of 2024. Let me know down in the comments below what sort of list or ranking of 2024 you would like to see next. Make sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe if you haven't already to join in the film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. And that's all. And make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.